Hello, hello. Good afternoon in Europe, good morning in the Americas, good evening in Asia. I'm Isabelle Hogar, founder and host of Borderline, a media podcast newsletter community for defiant global citizens. And I'm joined today by my friend Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Isabelle. Thank you for having me along for the live today.
I love it.
I am just going to say a little something about who I
Yes,
am.
yes.
Yeah,
Introduce
we'll
yourself,
start with that.
please.
So I am a writer, speaker, and advisor working on digital nomads, remote work, and the future of citizenship right now. I have a newsletter, which is lraz.substack.com, where I write about borderless living.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to have all that information in the comments as well. So you can sign up right now. Mine is at borderlinepod.com, or you can sign up after the talk. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo. I'm going to fix that. Okay, all good. So we're here today to talk about building a post-pandemic career on your own terms, thinking, within a global mindset of how to build a global career, or a location-independent career. A couple caveats. I wrote, in a post introducing this live, I wrote post-pandemic. I realize we're not actually post-pandemic, right? A lot of us are still very much in pandemic. And in fact, there are a lot of places that don't have access to the vaccine, or even more so in pandemic than we are. But what I mean by it is I think we're post the panic part of the pandemic, and we are thinking about kind of what's coming after, and continuing to build our career in this new reality that is ours. And also, we're going to come back to that many times during the conversation, but being mindful that when we talk about building a global career, the world is, unfortunately, I know we're both doing a lot of advocacy around this, it's not equally accessible to everyone. And there are a lot of varying levels of access that are going to impact careers, and we're going to absolutely take that into consideration. So to get us going, Lauren, can you explain, what is your global career, and what made you think, hey, I don't want to be confined within a single country for the rest of my days?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little bit like never really knowing anything different, because I came straight out of university and became sort of a freelancer and a member of a distributed team with a big tech company. And for me, I guess it was always about thinking about a career in terms of being a portfolio career. So I never had a particular desire to become like a full-time employee. And in my context, where I was coming from, I was based in like a small city in the UK, and I needed to move to London for the media industry to kind of take advantage of the opportunities that were based in an office. And I kind of did some calculations and just figured it would be much better value to think globally and to spend time in different places than it would be to move to a super high cost of living, like major global capital. So I've really built a portfolio career, meaning that I sort of move from project to project, and I do a lot of different things. I sort of apply my skills in lots of different ways. And I really have always kind of pursued that way of working, and have been able to live and work in more than 40 countries over the last 10 years.
That's a very impressive number. I always say like 5 countries. And people are like, woo, 5 countries, cool. But I'm like, oh, actually, I know people who've done a lot more.
But you have a totally different approach, because I'm nomadic.
Yeah.
And you are.
I am, I like to call it, I'm a serial monogamist with countries, which means I move somewhere and I nest there completely, and I stay there for a few years. And it is, I'm sedentary, but I'm sedentary in successive locations in a way. Or at least, well, actually, that's kind of how I thought about it. And so currently my base is in London. Actually, today I'm in Paris. I saw someone say hello from Paris. I'm here too. And it's Happy Bastille Day to everyone. So for me, I always needed actually to have full-time corporate employment. And to have that security. Part of it is more my temperament. I was just slightly, having grown up in France in an era of really high unemployment. I was just terrified of unemployment, and I just always wanted that security. And I had really high student loans, so it was always about, I need to have that paycheck that's coming. But also, I started out in journalism. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, which I actually didn't get to be because that's too unstable a career. It's too freelance. I just couldn't do it financially at the time. And so yeah, I think we have really different experiences where I was able to have a global career while being, employed with, a steady paycheck coming every month. And for me, that meant moving, with essentially with my company. So I was working for LinkedIn for a long time, and I got to work in 3 different countries with them. So completely different experience for sure. Just quick hello to everyone in the stream. And by the way, you can ask your questions, so don't hesitate. I love seeing all the countries you're coming from. Hello, Nigeria, Switzerland, Dominican Republic, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, UK, India. That's just like the the last 10. But do send your questions in the stream. So where should we start? If someone wants to do what you're doing, Lauren, what should they be thinking about? How do they make that happen?
I would say step 1 is to think about a project. So rather than thinking, where do I want to be in 5 or 10 years time, like the careers advisor at school always says, make a 5-year plan. I say, screw that. What you really want to do is just focus in on one single project that you want to try doing kind of on the side or just sort of as a sort of interest-based or passion-based thing, and use that as a way to experiment. So really, really define like something that you want to do. So if you want to experiment with writing, or you want to experiment with speaking or making videos, boil it down to something that you can achieve in like the next 3 months as an experiment, and then put as much sort of time as you put into the project into self-reflection to really try and understand what you're trying to get from your work. Because I think for me, it's always been looking just up the next rung of the ladder. So I was starting from starting from zero, and I was just interested in doing that first thing. So for me, it was like landing that first writing commission for a magazine or a newspaper. And then it was about doing a slightly better paid one for a slightly more prestigious publication, and then really just building it up from there. But I think so much of making a career, particularly in knowledge work and particularly in remote work, is about getting to know yourself and your strengths and what you actually want, sort of what you find meaningful at work.
That's really interesting. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And when we give advice to young people about choosing a career or things like that, we're asking people to like pick a job, pick a profession you want to do. Often with zero knowledge of what the reality of that profession is like. And I like to tell people instead, think about, what does a good day look like to you? What do you want in it? What do you want to be doing? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be working with? What skills do you want to be using? What things do you not want to do? And then start from that. And often, so for me, and especially when you're starting out, you don't get to have a long checklist of all the things that you want. I mean, you can have that list, but you're not going to tick all those boxes. So it's figure out which one is the most important one. When I graduated from university, I really had 2. I needed a job that paid like now. And because, again, student loans. And I wanted to be, so I was studying in the United States. I'm from Europe. I wanted to be outside of my comfort zone, outside of the, rich kind of world, and explore a little bit beyond. And so I applied to every job I could find that fit those boxes. And so literally all over the world. And I ended up in Cambodia. And I could have ended up, because I also applied there, I could have ended up in South Africa. I could have ended up in Honduras. So, wide net to just get started, right?
Sorry, I was just going to kind of ask a follow-up question about that, which is, do you think that you were prepared for what you found when you actually arrived in Cambodia, like outside of your home country for the first time?
No, it was, I always think about it as the year that I truly became an adult. I was 24 years old, and in a way, even though I was quite I was a news addict and quite educated and quite, read a lot and followed the news and all of that. I was very naive about, what the real world looks like, and so I think that was an education. Even though I was still kind of led by the hand, in that, I was working and living with a lot of other expats, and so I wasn't just kind of thrown into the deep end, but still, especially as a journalist, I got to cover things realities that just were not the realities of my life in terms of poverty, corruption, oppression, and all these things that just kind of like hit me, and it was a major culture shock as well.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think one of the things I've really taken from my travels is exactly what you just described, which is kind of the reality of what the world as a whole is actually like. Because I think we all are kind of born in our nation states, and then we are taught only from the perspective of that country. And countries have this huge vested interest in trying to convince their citizens that they are the best country in the world, and you would never, ever want to leave. And actually, I think it's by travel that we come to understand that there are these incredible kind of solutions and different ways of thinking that come from all over the world. And in my view, like, no country is better than another. But it's really, really, I think it's really, really important that we're able to kind of be exposed to other cultures and other ways of thinking. And that actually, as a world, we'd be moving a lot faster if that was more sort of integrated into our working lives.
Yeah, I mean, the past year has proven it. The thing I love when I move to a new country is finding out how do politics work. Like, what are their institutions? How does their healthcare system function? How is the workplace organized? How are schools held? It's fascinating. School days, anything, from 3 hours to 12, around the world. And it's just fascinating because the problems of human life are pretty much the same everywhere, but the solutions are just so varied, and there's so much to learn by exploring how other cultures, how other nations have addressed a particular issue that we have as well. And my first country that I moved to was the United States when I was 17 years old, and my eyes were absolutely opened up on things like disability. Often disabled citizens in France were kind of hidden away. There wasn't a single disabled person in my school. And then you arrive in America and you're like, oh, there's disabled people everywhere, which means they must exist in my country too. I just didn't see them. So, it's things like that were like really opening up for me. We have a question on the stream. I'm just going to put it on the screen, in fact. When freelancing abroad, how challenging would you both say networking is? Oh, that is a big one. Do you want to take it, Lauren?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say, like, on the ground networking is relatively easy to do in terms of there are quite a lot of international resources out there now that will kind of tell you what the local meetups are. So meetup.com being one of them, Eventbrite being another kind of resource, Facebook events. You can kind of get an idea of things that are going on, and then you can go along and attend events, book tickets online, etc. So I've never found that a particular problem. But you do have to actively go and do it. You really have to kind of do your research, find stuff that's interesting to you, and then kind of make yourself go along. And that's not always easy if you're in an unfamiliar culture and an unfamiliar country. I think that loneliness and kind of mental health are things to really, really keep your eye on and sort of prepare yourself for, in terms of making sure that you sort of have a support network back home when you first kind of go to another country, and that there are people that you can check in with while you're kind of still making friends on the ground. And one other thing that I I just add is I do think that networking is something that happens really, really well in virtual environments too. So, the internet really allows us to make our own serendipity. So you don't have to kind of travel to Silicon Valley to go meet the investors anymore. You really can kind of seek out the people that you want in your network, that you want to have professional or personal relationships with online. And I'd say that us being on this call today is probably a really good example of that, Isabelle. We have yet to meet in person.
That's correct. We never have, even though we've done plenty of work together. One thing I would add is I think there's definitely something that I would acknowledge, in that being kind of moving around from country to country, I have found in some ways has limited me, is that I have a big network in the United States because that's where I went to school, but I can't really I stay in touch with them, but they share a lot of jobs, but I can't take them because they're still restricted to being US based. I have very little network in my own country. So if I try to move home career wise, in media, network is everything. I would kind of have to start from scratch. It would probably take a step back. I now have a decent network in the UK. And so that's kind of giving me more incentive not to leave. And so the network that you have is a big part of your professional capital. And moving around constantly can weaken that, and requires extra effort to make sure to maintain. Obviously, now we have all the digital tools that make that so much easier. And I think, in fact, when we talked about this on the last week's live stream, but the idea that careers are very much now about the networks that you build. And so, actually, if you have a global network, and it's a small world in the end, especially in your particular industry, people are going to cross paths many, many times throughout your life. But I'm an introvert. And so I understand that, it can be exhausting work for sure. But the past year has proven there's plenty that can be done online, definitely.
Absolutely. And I just add to that I think when you're a freelancer, it can often be quite difficult to actually make time to not only make new connections, but actually to keep on top of your existing connections and sort of make sure that you're, I guess, maintaining those relationships, even if you're not in the same place. So for anyone who is a freelancer in the audience, kind of thinking, when am I going to get time to actually be building up these networks or kind of maintaining these relationships to kind of have a career like we're talking about, I would just say that it's like the best investment that you can make in your career is to take your relationships and your network really, really seriously. I'm at the point now where I don't do any kind of active outreach for my to get work. But instead, I just sort of keep in touch with the people who I think do interesting work or who I really admire and respect. And through that kind of maintenance of relationship, through making sure that if I can do something to help them, I am, I just find that a lot comes to me. And I think that's the ideal scenario to be in as a portfolio careerist, turning down work.
And also, these people end up kind of, especially if you're in a portfolio career, they kind of end up being your colleagues and your coworkers and your network. And it's just, you don't want to be alone behind your computer all the time. So actually, that it really is very personally enriching and fulfilling, as well as just being good on it from just a business perspective. We have another great question here from Jared. How do you discover cultural nuances in a foreign environment so you're able to integrate and develop rapport with potential clients? Do you go to cultural festivals and musical performances, etc.? Lauren, do you want to share your techniques for managing the culture gap and the culture
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I keep it pretty simple. I have to say this is the first time I've ever been asked to sort of articulate it. So bear with me if this answer is a mess. But I think for me, a huge part of traveling in general is the opportunity to sink into other cultures and to learn from them. So rather than doing the activities, is it Jared? Yes, Jared,
Yeah.
has suggested here, I'm kind of doing those anyway for personal reasons. You know, I want to go to like cultural festivals, performances. I want to check out the things I like in a city. For example, I enjoy like improv comedy. I enjoy specialty coffee. So I'll like seek out both, I guess, the global spaces that are part of a kind of global network, as in the case of specialty coffee or improv, and then look for kind of the local additions that are happening to that. And then equally, I want to expose myself to like the history and the culture of a place, simply because I'm there and I want to feel engaged and interact with the people around me and the environment around me. So I would say I do all those things, but not in order to develop rapport with potential clients, though maybe that does contribute to me being able to do that, to be able to develop rapport. But I actually think more than specific cultural insights, what's important is instead to kind of be open-minded and to learn from your clients, or indeed from your friends and anyone around you.
Yeah. So kind of to add to that, yes, you kind of just enjoy things where you are. And the added benefit is, as you said, that it does help you understand the cultural nuances. One thing I've always avoided is just hanging out around people from my own country. So, there is kind of that gregarious tendency when people are new somewhere to go and, seek out fellows of their nationality just because it's easier. Maybe there's no language barrier or whatever. But that does isolate you a bit from the culture that you're going into. French expats are very well known for that. So I try not to do that. My friends tend to be from everywhere. So I'm friends with other expats, but not from or immigrants, but not from my country. I mean, some are, because there's a lot of French people in London, but I don't do it on purpose. The other thing, the thing I'm a big fan of is language skills. I think I'm fascinated with language because the way that you describe the world is the way that you see the world, and languages change, inform kind of how values reflect and inform at the same time values and world and perspectives, and things like that. So if you're able to pick up a little bit of the language, or at least understand how it is built and how it just helps kind of open a window into how the people see the world. I'm fluent in English and in French. I wish I had more, because I feel like with every new language that you learn, it's like you open a whole other side of your personality that you had no idea was there. So if you're able to do that, that's wonderful. That does require staying a little bit longer in a country than if you're just kind of hopping from place to place. All right, we're gonna hide this question. Don't hesitate to put more questions in the stream. I wanted to get into the practicalities, Lauren, of building a global career. I know when we were talking before we went live, we had a whole list of things to look out for. Do you want to start with a couple?
Yeah. So obviously, one of the biggest things to be aware of is visas. So I think, Isabelle, you have some sort of insights into some of the, I guess, challenges that can come with those in an employment context. But I'm just going to say something about remote work and digital nomad visas. So these types of visas are super new. They've really only emerged in response to the pandemic since last year. And what they allow you to do is, as a remote worker for sort of any global company, or as a freelancer, you're able to get a visa that allows you to go to a country and do global work in that location. So that means that you'd be working for either an overseas company or sort of working for yourself. And not working for a local company. And that's a totally new type of visa. They tend to be a lot cheaper than like a permanent relocation. And there are more and more of them popping up all the time. We're really beginning to see kind of countries compete for knowledge workers in this way. However, they are often prohibitively expensive in terms of the salary requirements. So, for example, there's one in Barbados, and it requires $50,000 per year, which I think for a lot of people in advanced economies is probably quite feasible. But I understand that in emerging economies, that's going to be a really, really high threshold to meet. So there are some inequities coming through that. Equally, there are new countries kind of being added to that list every day. So it is worth having a dig into perhaps some countries you've never even heard of and kind of see what they're offering. But this is sort of a new way, a new form of global mobility to be able to move around the world and sort of pick up these visas as you go. And the other thing that I'll just mention, because it's related to this, is if you are a freelancer, you should think carefully about business registration. So, for example, you don't actually have to be a citizen or a resident of a place a lot of the time in order to register a business entity there. So I know quite a lot of nomads that will register a business entity away from their home country, or sort of in a preferred country that offers particularly good like tax benefits, or it's just got a very, very simple system that makes it very, very easy to kind of file taxes and things. So thinking about where you're going to register a business, which kind of markets that you might need to access, and whether there's a benefit to registering in one place over another. And also, if you're a freelancer, whether you would be better off registering a business rather than trying to be a freelancer in lots of different countries, which tends to come with a lot of bureaucracy. So yeah, just some kind of food for thought there. But Isabelle, I would love to hear a little bit about the more employee side of visas, which I know you've wrestled with a little bit.
And before to that though, I do want to mention, get some professional help, because the whole tax and visa situation is just so complex depending on where you are, and each country is going to have its own rules, and you just don't want to be. I know I've seen a lot. It's starting to be a little bit more organized, but I've seen a lot of nomads that were essentially just going places on a tourist visa and kind of staying under the radar. It's not something I would necessarily recommend if it's going to be your long-term life, because that sounds messy. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there, but I'd actually just challenge what you said a little bit.
Please do.
There are a number of countries in the world that have clarified their position, and as long as you are not working for a local employer, you are actually entitled to be doing remote work. On a normal tourist visa. So while I'd say it's always so important to look up the specific regulations that apply to your passport and the country that you're hoping to go to, also don't rule it out, because don't rule out the tourist visa side of things, where countries do in fact allow that. A lot of the time, a country's position on this will be about trying to protect local jobs, and therefore they are not actually very concerned with people on sort of doing remote work on a laptop.
Right. And think also about what you might owe to the country that you come from. I know that American citizens have to continue to pay taxes in America wherever they are, as long as they have that passport. So, again, make sure to research. But yes, from an employee perspective, so if you're moving with a company, either to take up a new job or you're being transferred within your company, there's something that's kind of almost disappeared, except for a handful of like high risk, high pay job. It's like the expat contract, where you stay under the conditions of, wherever you come from. So, you might work under a French or an American contract, but be working in Dubai or be working in Ghana or wherever. Those are increasingly rare because they're extremely expensive to the company. What happens most often is the company moves you under a local contract in the new country that you're moving to. So the first thing to think about is, is that local contract going to be satisfactory to you? For instance, when I moved from France to Australia, I had to give up a very safe contract in France, which pretty much, it was impossible to fire me, to Australia, where it was essentially, fire at will, and, they could get rid of me anytime that they wanted. So, are you okay with that? And then thinking about the visa, a lot of often sort of intercompany transfers, it's going to be a visa that's going to be very limited. So you might actually not be able to quit your job and take a job with a different company in your new country. If you quit the job, you're going to have to move home. You might even, that's the case in the UK, and I've seen a lot of friends get get screwed, pardon my French, because they hadn't realized when they signed up that the visa forbade them from applying for a different kind of visa. So they thought it was kind of their way into the country, but actually it's a visa that mandates that they go home at the end. There is no option. And so that can be really hard, because when you go, you think, oh, that's fine, I'll just go for a few years. A few years later, well, actually, you've met someone, you fell in love, you want to stay there, and you can't. It's just, there's absolutely no way. So make sure to really look at the fine print and don't count on your company to be doing that for you, because their interest is to lock you in and to pay the cheapest visa that they can possibly get. So make sure to advocate for yourself is really important.
I think another thing that it's probably worth bringing up here is pensions, which tend to be very, very nation-based. So just to put my cards on the table before we get into this, I do not have a pension. I've not paid into a pension. I'm 29 years old. And my kind of plan on this is to, my plan on this is essentially to generate passive income over the course of my working life, in the hope that this will provide me with, I suppose, my own kind of private pension. I may pay into something at some point, but right now it feels like there is nothing designed for my situation.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's an area, everything around finance and insurance for people who live global lives is an area that is absolutely ripe for innovation and disruption. There's just so much that needs to be created. So I think I have a little bit of social security in the US. If I dig really deep into paperwork, I might have a little bit there. I paid into a pension in Australia, and when I left the country, they gave me the money back, but they took 35% in taxes. So yeah, that's 2 years of pension contributions that essentially, I got a little bit of cash at the end, but it's worth nothing. I have some pension in France where it's a state system. Everyone is different. Like some places you're investing in the stock market, some places you pay the government, and then the government will pay you when you're old, which is kind of the French system. But I haven't paid for nearly long enough. So by the time I'm like 65, whatever, they'll be like, hey, here's pennies, and I paid for in a British system. I mean, so everything is super messy. My advice to anyone who lives globally is just look out for yourself, because currently the systems are not built for this life. And that means, and it's the reason that if you're working globally and living globally, and especially if you're a portfolio, career, self-employed person, your rates need to reflect the fact that you have to look out for yourself on all of these things. Paid holidays, pension, health insurance, any kind of disability, any kind of moment when you get COVID and you're not able to work for 6 weeks or whatever, you get long COVID and you're kind of at half productivity for the longest time. That's gonna really impact your earnings. So that's something to absolutely keep in mind throughout your global career, for sure. And get insurance, right? I know you were telling me about some health insurance that exists now for people like us.
Yeah, a shameless plug because they're friends of mine, but there is a company called Safety Wing. I think it's safetywing.com, and they offer nomad nomad travel insurance and also nomad health insurance. They don't actually cover me because I have a long-term disability, and they do not they outright reject people in that circumstance, which I hope to see change in the future. But I also know that they're working on a nomad pension product, which may well solve the problem that I've identified, that there's nothing that kind of fits my situation in the future. But yeah, there are a few companies kind of popping up now in this space and others. So something to kind of keep your eye on if you're thinking about maybe taking your career global, because I think it really opens up opportunities once there is actually kind of the infrastructure, the services there. It makes it a lot easier. I think Isabelle and I have really done a lot of this during a time where it perhaps wasn't as easy, but it's sort of becoming easier now with a lot more of an ecosystem there.
Yeah, and it's only gonna get easier. I think the past year has really accelerated a lot of these things for the better. We have a question that I think is a good one to sort of use as a conclusion. LinkedIn user, I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is because of your privacy settings. Asks, would you both still recommend becoming a portfolio careerist, even though there are still significant challenges? Yay or nay?
Oh, for me, it's a definite yay. Like I have no wish. Like I get offered jobs quite a lot, which is a really like kind of complimentary thing to happen. But I'm very, very, very rarely tempted. I would say as well though that for me, it's really about the work. It's not really about whether I'm an employee or a freelancer. So it may be that in my portfolio career, I take on a project for 5 years, and that actually maybe that's some kind of employment format in the future. I think I've begun to think quite differently about this since COVID, because now that all jobs are remote and we're sort of moving towards flexibility. Sorry, I kind of misspoke there. I know not all jobs are remote. Many more knowledge jobs are now remote. But I think it sort of gives a different lens to that idea of employment over I suppose maybe what I'm saying is like employment could potentially be a project within a broader portfolio career in the kind of remote work context. But yeah, I would recommend a portfolio career for sure. It's incredibly fulfilling. You get to wake up in the morning and decide how you want to spend your work time that day. And you get to really kind of follow, I think, your passion and your intuition, not just instructions.
Yeah, 100%. I'm much newer to it. I think for me, yes, because with a big caveat, because I'm in a place where I have more personal freedom now, in that, like currently, I'm not. I've just started out on my portfolio career, and I'm currently not making a living. I have savings from the time when I was a corporate employee and earning a much better living, that I'm using now while I'm building this portfolio career. So it's the fact that I have this financial runway that for me makes the level of stress of a portfolio career more manageable. I do like the idea of potentially including some employment. I've looked at even part-time employment that would still give me time and space for other projects as well, because the thing actually that I have found that I would have a hard time going back to is doing a single thing all the time, and so I like the variety, being able to do speaking and podcasting and writing and consulting, and just having that variety for me really works and keeps my mind engage for sure. So, I would recommend it. Again, it really depends. I think it has less stability and a bit more uncertainty than perhaps other careers, at least at the beginning, while you build up that portfolio of customers. But again, employment isn't what it used to be, and it's not nearly as stable as it used to be either. So perhaps the two are just going to be meeting in the middle.
I think I have a couple of things just to add. One is talking about financial runways. I feel like it's totally relevant for me to mention that as part of my kind of, if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow and needed medical attention for a year, that kind of plan, I did actually build up basically a personal runway that was equivalent to 1 year of living expenses. And that is, so right now, it's like not as what am I trying to say here? It is not as sort of abundant as it could be, because I've spent the last year of my life writing a book, which is not a thing that pays particularly well unless you sell a lot of copies, and you have to finish it first. But I think in general, it can be really, really good to look at your personal finances if you're thinking about taking the portfolio career route, and identify what your living costs are. So not what your salary is right now, but actually what your living costs are, the kind of budget that you would need in the worst case scenario to kind of keep on the way that you are. And then build that from whether it's freelance work if you're already a freelancer, or it's a corporate job, as you were saying, Isabelle. I think it's really, really good to do that, and it gives you that security in case you're not able to kind of get moving as quickly as you'd like to, or in case something unexpected happens. And the second thing I just wanted to add is it's really strange for me because I hear a lot of people talk about employment as being a very secure kind of way of working. But for me, I find it really restricting as an idea because you can't earn more. So as in you're limited to that salary that you're getting every month, and you don't have a kind of an avenue in order to decide, okay, I need this much extra money this month, so I'm going to kind of hustle and I'm going to do that. So I think it's kind of, it swings and roundabouts. There are pros and cons to both sides. But I think it's an important point to not just look at a salary as secure, but also to look at a salary as like restricting. Maybe the ideal balance is to be a portfolio careerist with some projects on the side, even if you are kind of focusing your attention on a main gig.
Absolutely. And that's the, it's particularly true in journalism, in media, but I think it's kind of true everywhere. And it's the advice I give to every young person that started is like, start now building your business of one. Have your network, have your email list for a newsletter, have your Twitter presence, your LinkedIn presence, your brand, whatever, and have that as your personal, professional capital that you can take with you wherever you go, whatever country you go to, whatever company you go to, if you're employed, something that is, truly yours, kind of your reputation is your capital. And it's something that you should start building right away, whichever career path you choose. And we know that, corporations aren't going to necessarily be loyal to you when, life employment is not a thing anymore. So you do need to be able to rely on yourself very much.
Can I ask you a question?
Please. We're running over, but people are still listening, so we'll just keep going.
Cool. I just wanted to ask you, since you've transitioned from being an employee into being a kind of portfolio careerist, how's your separation between work and life? Do you find that to be better or worse, kind of being in charge of your own time versus the employee role?
Well, I was always terrible at it, even when I was an employee. So in a way, that hasn't changed all that much because my work has always been, even when I was an employee, very much a part of my identity and something that I did all the time. Sorry, I have a bit of an echo here. I do think the challenge, obviously, when you're portfolio career self-employed, has been made even stronger in the past year because we're all working from home maybe, and essentially moving from the desk to the couch is not much of a commute. So we've talked about this before. I don't necessarily need the balance or the separation between the two. Especially when you're building, a media brand like I'm building, the brand is me. There's not much of a wall between the things that I'm doing professionally and who I am personally. It's the same values, it's the same interests. And I love it. So I'm quite happy to keep doing it. And in fact, I was just doing it nonstop, and I'm going on holiday right after this because I need a couple weeks off just because I'm tired. But I cannot wait to get back into it. To be honest, I think the difference, when I was working corporate job, when I was working for LinkedIn, I spent a lot of time building something that I'm very proud of, that we're on right now. A lot of the products that we're using, I was part of LinkedIn live video launch. I remember it. The big difference is that the thing that I'm building now is something that I own entirely, and all the decisions are mine. And that is so incredibly satisfying that I'm quite happy to do it many more hours than any other job.
So I think we're pretty much the same on this front in terms of personal mission being at the kind of core of our work, and sort of feeling that these are things that you would want to be doing with your time, regardless of whether it is your job or not. I try to think of it as work-life integration. So I want my work to reflect how I want to be spending my time anyway, and what I think is important in the world. And therefore, it's actually very, very easy to spend a lot of time on it, or not really count the time that you're spending on it, because you're able to kind of integrate who you are with what you do. I think having that purpose in your work, to just bring us back to the beginning of our conversation, really comes from self-reflection. So I'd really, really encourage anyone thinking about career moves right now to invest that time in themselves, to really think about what they want, not only from their work, but from their life too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to end this, but actually we have two questions that are really interesting. One is about age, and then kind of connected. So does age matter in terms of starting a portfolio career for people who might be a bit older? And then I have a parallel question from Hilevi, who's asking, are there many women with kids doing this? So what I would say here is that actually, potentially, yes, if you are older, if you have kids, it might actually be great, because you still have a lot of traditional employers who are not giving working parents the flexibility that they need. You're still going to have a lot of traditional employers who are ageist and are not interested in the experience and the value that older professionals bring. And so, in a way, a portfolio career, it's in your own hands. Now, you might have financial limitations are different. Obviously, the closer you are to retirement age, if you wish to retire, or if you're at a point that you can no longer work as much, the more you need to be thinking about that pension and making sure that your savings are lined up. If you have children, you can't really afford to not make as much money at one point, because you got to feed your kids, and that's more important than me feeding myself. So I think those are going to be kind of the limitations. But in terms of flexibility, I don't always think, Lauren, I think there's plenty that you can do.
Yeah, I think specifically on the age portion, I think that a lot of older workers may find themselves in a very good position to pursue a portfolio career, because they probably have more contacts from over the years that they've been working so far, and perhaps seniority, which can make it a bit easier to kind of transition in such a way where it's very easy to identify what it is that you do, maybe by your previous job title. So I do think that young people have a lot of freedom and flexibility to kind of just take off if they want to. Older people probably have a more solid foundation to actually build from if they're looking to do that and kind of build their career at the same time as moving around. I do know quite a few people, both sort of international nomads and more people in the music and creative industries, who travel a lot sort of within their own country, who do have children. So I guess my response on that side is, it really just depends what you're looking for, who you are, who your partner is, who your children are, as to whether it can be right for you. And like any life decision, like relocating to a new city or sort of taking a new job, you do have to think about your sort of individual circumstances. I think that's super important. Nobody else can give you the answer to what your life and career should look like. It's very much about you as an individual human. And I really think people should lean into that.
Amen. We're going to close this out because we're quite over. I wanted to point people to a couple resources that I had been meaning to bring up that are relevant. One, since you were asking about older professionals, my friend Sarah Brown shares a lot of content around silver startups, older professionals, older women especially, and kind of how they show up and are rising in the workforce. That's really interesting to follow. And then there's this something that we'd been meaning to get into. We didn't get to, it wasn't in questions, but around the issues of living in different countries, around diversity and acceptance and inclusion, and where and what countries might be more accepting of who you are, depending on who you are, where you come from, whether you're LGBT plus, anything like that. I interviewed on the podcast Amanda Bates, who's the founder of theblackexpat.com. That's a really great site where she has experiences from Black expats from all over the world, going all over the world, and kind of sharing their experiences as well. Worth checking out. And then definitely check out Lauren's newsletter. Go ahead and tell us again where people can find your work.
So my newsletter is called Counterflows. It's a curated newsletter about borderless living, and you can find it at lraz, L-R-A-Z, .substack.com. And if you're interested in checking out my book, it's called Global Natives, and you can find it at holloway.com/GN.
Yes, it's on pre-order, and I cannot wait to read it and to bring you on the podcast and do more lives when it comes out for real. My work is at borderlinepod.com. There's a podcast called Borderline. There's a newsletter. There's plenty of articles at borderlinepod.com. We'll make sure to put all the links in the comments, but please do sign up for the newsletter, and that's how you'll hear about the upcoming lives, because we'll make sure to do more. We're going to take a bit of a summer holiday, and we'll be back before the autumn, before back to school, to get us set up for September. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll talk to you in a few weeks.
Thanks, Isabelle. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lauren.